Hello, my friends. This is Origins, and I'm Don Chapman, its host. It's so good to have you with us today. Origins is a forum where we use the evidence of science to validate the truth of creation. Our guest today is Dr. Brad Harrop. Brad,
Hey,
it's so good having you with us today.
Good to be back.
And we're going to talk about a subject today that is fascinating to many people. It's not only captivated our minds, but often our imaginations as well. That's the subject of dinosaurs.
That's right. If you think about it for just a moment, there's not too many young people that aren't fascinated by these amazing creatures.
Why are dinosaurs a source of contention in the creation-evolutionary debate?
If you think about it, dinosaurs really are the sugar stick candy that evolutionists hold out to our children. Because after all, if they can plant the seed in a child's mind that we're separated from dinosaurs by 65 million years, then already they have a foothold in the door. And there's not too many kids, 5, 6, 7 years old that aren't already fascinated by these creatures.
There's no small amount of material talking about dinosaurs, is there?
If you look on magazine covers, they are constantly bombarding us about these amazing creatures.
That's a lot of magazine covers there.
But Don, it's because of these same amazing creatures that we really are losing so many of our children. If on the screen you see a page out of a very popular kids scholastic book called The Magic School Bus, you'll notice a young boy, he's holding a picture of a dinosaur chasing a caveman. He says, "This story is make-believe," and his friend says, "There were no dinosaurs in the time of cave people."
They're already, before the kids are big enough almost to be on that school bus, they're already wanting them to negate any idea that dinosaurs and people could exist at the same time.
That's right. If you look at the top left of the screen, it says, "No people ever saw a dinosaur when early humans appeared on the earth. Dinosaurs had already been dead for millions of years. People found out about dinosaurs from fossils."
Now, sometimes people say to me, do creationists even believe in dinosaurs? Obviously, everybody believes in dinosaurs, right?
Definitely. We have found their fossilized remains on all 7 continents, Arctic to Antarctic and everywhere in between.
So the whole issue is dating, and did humans and dinosaurs live at the same time?
That's exactly right. National Geographic GeoGuide page. If you notice the very first sentence, they're trying to establish their evolutionary beginnings. That is, no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. At the bottom of the page, you'll notice it says, "Use this GeoGuide page to help capture the interest of young readers and stimulate discussion with them." Well, discussion about what? The fact that no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur.
Now, you've done some study on this of your own. Do you believe that human beings and dinosaurs lived at the same time?
Definitely. We're going to look at some evidence today that you're not going to see in your child's textbook. And let me share with you why you're not going to see that. A fellow by the name of Dr. Philip Kitcher wrote a book called Abusing Science, the Case Against Creationism, in which he claimed that solid evidence for the coexistence of dinosaurs and humans, now this is using his words, would shake the foundations of evolutionary theory because, of course, he says the dinosaurs are supposed to have been long extinct by the time the hominids arrived on the scene. That's the key phrase we need to remember, is that it would shake the foundations of the evolutionary theory.
So this moves it from the sugar candy for our children to a very important point for all of us.
That's right. The question before us today is not, did the dinosaurs walk the earth? Because we know they did. The question really is, when did they walk the earth?
So help us to see, if you would, why you believe dinosaurs and human beings were contemporaries at one time.
Tell you what, I'll go up to the screen, show us some evidence.
That'd be wonderful.
As I'm doing that, we need to understand the word dinosaur was coined roughly in 1845. A fellow by the name of Richard Owen, he came up with that particular word, used 2 Greek words, Dinosaurus, translated by him as fearfully great lizard. And Don, that's really when our fascination with these creatures began. But I want us to look and see if we can discern today, using scientific evidence, of when dinosaurs really did walk the earth. For instance, many people probably missed a study that was announced January 2005 where they actually showed a dinosaur that had been eaten by a mammal. Now, Don, you know, according to the evolutionary theory, dinosaurs evolved into mammals, and yet here we have the fossilized remains of a mammal that actually ate a dinosaur.
That doesn't make...
it doesn't fit.
Doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit. Or we could talk, for instance, about the Ica stones of Peru. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Javier Cabrera was given one of these stones as a gift from a local farmer. He noticed that there were carvings on it, and he asked the farmer, he said, "Where did you get these?" And the farmer indicated that these were burial stones the ancient Inca Indians used to place in the tombs.
So give me a date on those stones.
During the Incan Empire.
Which would be what, 1400, 1500s?
1200? Somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Dr. Cabrera decided he was going to find as many of these as he could. All told, he's found roughly over 11,000 of them. And you'll notice on some of them, it's not just dinosaurs, it's actually dinosaurs and men. And the ancient Incan Indians, they actually knew details that it would be much, much later that we would discern. I'll show you a great example of that. You'll notice on this particular stone, this dinosaur has dermal frills. It's almost kind of like the fins of a sailfish here. For the longest time, scientists, when they looked at sauropod dinosaurs, they said, he doesn't have those dermal frills on his back. That was until 1992. In 1992, in an article titled "New Look for Sauropod Dinosaurs," they noted, recent discovery of fossilized sauropod skin impressions reveals a significantly different appearance for these dinosaurs. The fossilized skin demonstrates that a median row of spines was present, some quite narrow, others are broader and more conical.
So our modern research is just catching up with what the Inca Indians knew from observation in 1400 AD.
That's 1992, we're finally finding out something that they had already known. Ellen Morse Bishop, commenting on this, she said the biggest spines found were about 9 inches long, shaped a little bit like a shark's dorsal fin. The smallest at the tail tip were about 3 inches high.
Yeah.
Precisely what they had drawn.
Fascinating.
Or we could talk, for instance, about the dinosaur figurines from Acambaro, Mexico. You know, Don, if you were to go there today, there's a mountain that they call El Toro, the bull. And it's at the foothills of that particular mountain that a gentleman, he was riding on the back of a horse, and from that elevated position he looked down and he saw the first of these ceramic figurines. They found over 30,000 of them now.
And how big are they?
Not very big at all. In fact, most of them are just kind of hand-sized, so to speak. Here you see just a couple of pictures of them.
And so would you compare that sort of to the little matchbox toys that our children have today?
Yes, exactly, exactly. Now, ironically, here's an interesting point a lot of people don't know, and that is we sent samples from this material off to 2 laboratories here in the United States. Now, they didn't send the entire dinosaur figurine. They just, for instance, would send a piece of a tail or a piece of a leg. They wanted them dated. And they came back with dates of roughly 1850 BC, 2000 BC, 1640 BC. So they then sent 8 additional samples to be what's called thermoluminescent tested. They really wanted to make sure they had this thing right. And that came back with dates of roughly 2000 BC.
Okay.
And that was the point at which they called both labs and they said, hey, you know that material we've been sending you, it's coming from dinosaur figurines. And guess what both labs did?
They quit doing their work for them.
They withdrew their results and said, we're sorry, we weren't able to give you accurate readings on your material.
Because the evidence wasn't fitting their theory.
The dinosaur figurines from Acambaro, Mexico, the Ica stones, and unfortunately what's happening too often is they're throwing out the evidence in order to keep that theory. Let's look at just a little bit more. For instance, University of Arizona, we sent them some dinosaur bone. We asked them if they would use their dating methods to date it. Now, we didn't tell them it was dinosaur bone. We simply said, can you date this blind material? Came back with a date of roughly 9,000 years before present. Not anywhere close to what they're trying to teach our children, and that is 65 million.
Million as opposed to 9,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about the Buddhist temple that was uncovered just recently in Cambodia? 800 years old. Had been completely grown over with vegetation. They came in with basically what you and I might call industrial Roundup. They peel back the vegetation, and lo and behold, somebody had carved dinosaurs into that Buddhist temple.
And that would be 1200 AD that you had something, again, someone drawing what they were seeing. Yeah, go ahead.
Or we could talk about the dinosaur petroglyph at National Bridges National Monument. You know, if you were to go there today, just outside of Blanding, Utah, there are 3 natural sandstone bridges, one of which is called Kachina, and it's on that particular bridge that you'll find not only this petroglyph, but also that of other flying reptiles and dinosaur-like creatures. Ironically, Fran Barnes, who is an evolutionist, he said there is a petroglyph in National Bridges National Monument that bears a striking resemblance to a dinosaur. Don, how do you draw something like that if you've never seen it?
I don't know.
I want to show you real quickly, talking about these flying reptiles. Now, supposedly, according to evolutionists, 65 million years separates man from pterodactyls or pterodons. But I want the parents out there especially to make sure they show the next two quotes from historians to their children. For instance, the first one comes from Greek historian, a fellow by the name of Herodotus. Look at what he said regarding these flying reptiles. "There's a place in Arabia to which I went on hearing of some winged serpents, and when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of a water snake, but he has wings without feathers and like as possible to the wings of a bat." So we've got a Greek historian who has first eyewitness testimony.
Wow.
But he's not the only one. I'm sure you've heard of somebody named Josephus.
Sure have.
Jewish historian. Remember, Josephus talks about Jesus Christ in his writings, talks about Pilate, but he also talks about these flying reptiles. Josephus wrote, "When the ground was difficult to be passed over because of the multitude of serpents which it produces in vast numbers, some of which ascend out of the ground unseen and also fly in the air, and they do come upon men at unawares and do them a mischief. He said, Moses made baskets like unto arks of sage and filled them with eaves or birds, carried them along with them, which animal is the greatest enemy to the serpents imaginable. For they fly from them when they come near them, and as they fly, they're caught and devoured by them."
Wow.
So the same person who historically wrote about Jesus Christ, who wrote about Pilate, is also writing about flying reptiles. Now, how does that fit in with the biblical worldview versus the evolutionary worldview?
That's a really good question.
Also, a lot of folks are not aware of the fact that here in the United States of America, for instance, around the Grand Canyon, there was an expedition. A fellow by the name of Dr. Samuel Hubbard. He set out to prove the American Indians had been here longer than we thought. He found things like their pottery and their clothing, but he also stumbled across their cave art. Now, I want you to read with me what he had to say regarding one of the finds. He said, "Taken all in all, the proportions are good. The huge reptile is depicted in the attitude in which man would most likely see it, reared on its hind legs, balancing with a long tail, either feeding or in a fighting position, possibly defending itself against a party of men." He went on to say, "The fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. The fact that the animal is upright and balanced on its tail would seem to indicate that the prehistoric artist must have seen it alive."
That is a powerful quote, and I just want people to linger there a moment and think about it. The fact is, if you just had bones, you wouldn't know the position of the dinosaur when it was active. You would have to see it alive in motion to on its rear legs and balance itself with its tail.
That's right.
So bones wouldn't give you that at all, would it?
Not at all. And you know, ironically, a lot of people would like to discount what he saw. Now, keep in mind, he also saw drawings of things like sheep, oxen.
And those are all accurate.
Exactly.
That's
so
right.
when I show you, for instance, this picture, you'll notice the arrow there. I'm going to blow it up so that you can see it a little bit better. That's not a sheep.
No, sir.
And it's not an ox, but it's an awfully good representation of a creature that we now know that existed at one time, a dinosaur called an Edmontosaurus.
And so common sense and logic would say that those Indians lived in that place and saw living dinosaurs.
Precisely.
Yes.
Precisely. Or we could talk about the discovery that was made March 24, 2005, not that long ago, where soft tissue was discovered in a T-Rex bone. Now, the actual thing that occurred was they were protecting the bone. They had basically covered it in what we would call plaster Paris. They brought a helicopter in to take that material back to the lab. Well, the block of material was too big. They realized they were going to have to break it and cut it in half. And it was only then that they were able to look inside that T-Rex bone, and they realized they had soft tissue, blood vessels, and what they think are blood cells.
Now, Dr. Harrop, we have two theories. It's got to be one or the other. One theory says these bones are 65 million years old. The other says they're maybe 1,000 years old. If you have soft tissue and bone marrow inside the bone, which theory best fits the evidence?
Any molecular biologist worth their salt at all is going to tell you soft tissue doesn't stick around for 65 million years.
It's absolutely a medical impossibility, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, DNA is going to be breaking down. So we have physical evidence, and yet, unfortunately, in the scientific community, because this violates the evolutionary theory, it gets thrown out.
That gets to me to be the point of almost irrefutable evidence.
Let's look at some more. For instance, the Carlisle Cathedral over in England. You know, if you were to go over there today, I would suggest to you, get them to roll up the carpet that you see there at the bottom of the screen, because below it is the tomb of a fellow by the name of Richard Bell. He died in 1496. Now bear in mind, remember I told you the word dinosaur was coined around 1845. This guy died in 1496.
400 years before the word.
When you have them roll up that carpet, you'll notice there's this beautiful marble, elegant tomb, and all the way around that tomb, there's a bronze ring that has carved into it different animals like an eel, a fox, a cat, dog, and even dinosaurs.
And so it isn't set off like we're doing mystery here or myth here. It's in that ring along with other animals that we identify as being contemporary animals.
Precisely.
Okay?
Or we could look at the burial clothes from Peru, dated roughly 700 AD, or the pottery that went along with those. That, as you can see, somebody took the time to paint a dinosaur-like creature. Or we could talk about the Roman mural from the 2nd century AD that shows two long-necked dragons, keeping in mind that we're talking about tiles that were hand-laid by people who were living just after the Bible was completed. You know, we think the Bible was probably completed around 90 AD. This was a mural that was put into place just after that. Or we could talk about a Mesopotamian cylinder seal that looks an awful lot like what you and I today would call an Apatosaurus. Or we could talk about these tablets that are attributed to Narmer, the legendary first pharaoh of a united Egypt, also bearing, as you can tell, a dinosaur-like creature on them.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of evidence from a lot of archaeological evidence to support the idea that dinosaurs were contemporary with man. The Bible has something to say about this too, doesn't it?
It sure does.
You know, we've got to take a break right now, and I don't want you to go away, because when we come back, we're going to take this evidence that we've looked at from science and from antiquity, and we're going to look at what God's Word has to say. Dr. Harrod will be joining me down here when we get back, and you'll want to be here as well. Don't go away.
Creation versus evolution. You weigh the evidence. The dinosaur bones, engineering masterpieces. Interestingly, it was an evolutionary scientist who said the bones of Brachiosaurus are a masterpiece of engineering. The design of the vertebrae was such that it provided great support for the huge dinosaur, but was also extremely lightweight. Evolutionists claim that all life, including dinosaurs, were the product of random processes. Yet they make statements about the wonderful design seen everywhere we look. Today's guest on Origins, Dr. Brad Harrod, is the co-founder of Focus Press Incorporated. He's also the co-editor of Think Magazine, where he's contributed many articles concerning the subject of creation. If you're searching for the truth and God's answers to life's questions, you'll want to subscribe to Think Magazine. Orders are being taken at 866-313-6474. For more information about Dr. Harrod, you can write to Focus Press Incorporated, 1600 Westgate Circle, Suite 125, Brentwood, Tennessee 37027. Or visit the website at www.focuspress.org.
We're back with Dr. Brad Harrod, and we're talking about dinosaurs, and we've just looked at some fossil evidence and some other evidence from antiquity that seems to indicate almost overwhelmingly that dinosaurs and humans were contemporaries on this earth. But the Bible has some things to say. You know, Brad, as I've had guests on Origins before, we've talked about a couple of creatures that are mentioned in the book of Job. The first one in chapter 40 and verse 15 is the behemoth. Talk to me a minute about the behemoth, and then what else Job has to say to us about dinosaurs.
If you really look at the description of that creature, you know, sometimes Bibles will have footnotes that describe it as a hippopotamus or an elephant. but it talks about having a tail like a cedar. Now, obviously, this creature had a massive tail, and yet you look at a tail of an elephant or a hippo, and that doesn't exactly fit the bill.
They tell me in Africa they literally make fly swatters out of elephant tails. That's not a cedar
right.
tree. Yes.
The next creature, we can find in Job chapter 41. It's a creature called a Leviathan. The text says, "Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook?" And if I were to go ahead and read just a few verses, listen to how it describes this amazing creature. It says, "Can you put a reed through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Though the sword reaches him, it cannot avail, nor does the spear, dart, or javelin. Darts are regarded as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. His undersides are like sharp pieces of pottery. He spreads pointed marks in the mire. On earth there is nothing like him which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing." Now,
sounds like a thick-skinned dinosaur to me.
it sounds, well, and unfortunately what a lot of the Bibles will say is crocodile or an alligator. And, and yet it says he beholds every high thing.
Yes. It's up in the air.
To me, really, the clincher, though, is verses 18 and following. Job chapter 41, verses 18 and following say, "His sneezings flash forth light. His eyes are like the eyelids of morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as a flame from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame of fire goes out of his mouth."
Now, the word that's jumping out at me here is a word that we often think of as myth, but it's dragons.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Bible's talking about dragons.
It is.
How do dragons relate to dinosaurs
Now,
in your
think
mind?
with me for just a moment, Don. In almost every ancient culture, we have stories, we have historical accounts of dragons. Now, unfortunately, oftentimes today, because of the influence of evolution and humanism, we discount it as, they didn't exist. But I'd like to suggest to you the possibility exists that dragons, what we're calling modern-day dragons, could very easily fall in the same class of animals that we would call a dinosaur today.
Why do you think that?
Let me give you some evidence example of what we know today. For instance, Marco Polo lived in China 17 years, and approximately AD 1271, he reported the Chinese emperor raised dragons to pull his chariots. In the year 1611, the emperor initiated the post of royal dragon feeder. In fact, we know Chinese families are said to have raised dragons, using their blood for medicines, highly prizing their eggs.
I wonder how many fingers those dragon feeders had by the end of the day, but that's all right.
Exactly. I wouldn't want that job.
Yeah.
If you think about it, we even have physical evidence like one of the oldest globes that we know of, the Lenox globe that is in a museum currently off the coast of China. Written in the words in Latin are the words, "Here be dragons." Why would a map maker living many, many, many decades ago, actually 100 centuries ago, why would they write, "Here be dragons"? Or why would a town in France change its name after a dragon was conquered? I think that the proof is dinosaurs or dragon-like creatures, they really were real. We've got evidence like Viking ships. The question is, what are we going to teach our children about these amazing creatures?
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's go back to where we began. It's not just that this is fascinating and I believe overwhelming evidence. What's the point? What's the sentinel point here that you need parents to take away from this program?
Well, if your 5-year-old has already begun to digest the idea that humans are separated from dinosaurs by 65 million years, then they've already compromised the opening chapter of God's Word.
Yeah.
And they are no longer buying into the idea that God was created along with all the land-dwelling creatures, and suddenly you have an evolutionary paradigm. In fact, their whole worldview is through an evolutionary perspective.
So when you're getting down on the floor with your 3-year-olds to play with the plastic dinosaurs, which kids are going to play with dinosaurs.
They are.
Get the people out and have the people slaying the dinosaurs, and you'll be subtly teaching a worldview, won't you?
Scientifically and biblically speaking, that's exactly accurate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don.
That's tremendous information. Folks, above all, I want you to remember that it's God's view that He created you, and that should be your worldview too. And so until next time, God bless you. It's been good having you with us on Origins.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file of program number 805 from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins Program number 805, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is made possible by the faithful prayers and the financial support of you, our Cornerstone Television family.